5, 6, 7, 8.
Welcome to the EX Podcast, where I talk with business leaders, authors, and disruptors on how the workplace is changing. The podcast brings a different lens to the conversation around HR transformation, company culture, and employee engagement. It offers a brand and customer experience perspective rather than a traditional HR perspective. Why? Because companies have to think of themselves as employment brands if they hope to attract and retain talents. It is time we put people first to rehumanize the workplace. Simply because leaders who don't care about the employees will eventually be surrounded by people who don't care about their business. Today's guest is Tom McCauley, Vice President of Employee Experience at Athletico Physical Therapy. Today with Tom, we talk about what triggered Athletico to create the VP of Employee Experience role and what was the process to define it versus a more traditional HR role. How does Athletico scale up the culture in EX and ensure there is consistency across all the 475 locations spread across 12 states? What makes Athletico different and attractive in a very competitive field with a close to zero unemployment rate among physical therapists? How does the company balance quantity versus quality when they have to fill positions very quickly in a very competitive candidate market? What prompted Tom to revamp the onboarding process and what the future state looks like? And how he sees the talent acquisition and HR function evolve in the next 5 years. Support for this podcast is brought to you by Life Guides. Life Guides helps companies increase employee engagement and reduce presenteeism loss by providing a human-to-human network to help employees through their life challenges. Life Guides pairs people who are going through a specific life challenge with guides who have gone through the exact same life challenge. As Match.com pairs people for love and Doctors on Demand finds doctors for patients, Life Guides matches a guide to each employee's specific life challenge. For employers, Life Guides offers a range of customized plans which support your employee families with one-on-one support, offers empathy, experienced guidance, and are highly affordable. Find out more at www.lifeguides.com. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Tom. And because it takes a good amount of time to produce this podcast, please make sure to review the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or YouTube, as it will help promote the content. If you want me to speak at your next event or get some advice on your EX initiatives, or send me feedback and suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummit.com or on Twitter at EX_summit. All right, let's get to it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the EX Podcast. Very excited for today's guest, Tom McCauley. Tom is calling from Chicago, and he's the Vice President of Employee Experience at Athletico. Tom, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
What's your background and what does Athletico do exactly?
Sure. My background, I kind of have a long and winding road, kind of atypical for how I landed in human resources. I started off out of college as a degreed finance person, and I spent a few years as a process consultant at a large consulting firm, and then I switched to the inside into corporate finance for probably 9 years. And it was at that point that I switched over into human resources, and I've been there ever since for probably the last 18, 19 years or so. So it has been a long and winding road, but I'm different in that I think I appreciate the numbers and the metrics and the quantitative side of things, but I also have a passion for what makes people tick and motivating people and helping them find their engagement. So I think this is actually a great role for my skills and my passions. So as you mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Employee Experience here at Athletico Physical Therapy. We have about 5,200 employees across 12 states. And we are an outpatient physical therapy company. So we provide physical therapy, occupational therapy, workman's comp, et cetera, to patients out in the open market. So we're in a rapid expansion phase, that's for sure. And it's actually a wonderful story about how our current executive chairman was actually the founder and original CEO of the company. He recently moved to a new position on the board. But it really started with one clinic and two, and then it went to 4, and then it went to 10, and now we're just short of 500. So it's an amazing growth story. So while all that crazy growth is going, we do have a very keen eye on keeping our employee experience the best that it can be, and which is not easy to do when you're growing that fast.
That's for sure, and we'll dive a bit deeper into this in a few moments. You came into a brand new role as VP of Employee Experience. What triggered Athletico to create this role, and what was the process to define it versus a more traditional HR role?
Yeah. No, I think they saw with the growth that was going on, and we are in a services industry. We don't build products or chairs or cars or tables. We're in the people and service industry. So I think they, to their credit, they really saw that we need to have a competitive advantage. We need to really focus some time and energy and capacity on our people and making sure that we can have it, be the best it can be. The story of actually how the role came about is kind of funny. I was and met some people at Athletico just through networking, and I pitched this role. And again, as everybody knows, the employee experience role, it changes a little bit depending on the company. I've seen them where employee communications or internal communications is bundled with employee experience, or sometimes it's with HRIS, or sometimes it's all three, or, there's different derivations of that. But here at Athletico, it's really bundled very closely with HRIS, our HR business partners, M&A, and then all the attrition, retention, engagement, those types of activities and initiatives that we do. Now, I had actually pitched this role, and, in short, they had said, I understand what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense. I just don't think we're ready to do that yet. So I actually took another job. And then about 7 months into that job, Athletico called back and said, hey, that role you pitched, we think we want to do it, and we want you to do it. So unfortunately, I had to resign from a really amazing company to come here, but I was excited about the opportunity to. It's not all too often you get to, jump into a role that you helped design, and I think it was really to their credit that they saw the expanding or evolving field of employee experience and wanted to put some muscle behind it.
That's an interesting story. I guess it's good for our listeners to hear that as well and say, hey, you may pitch an idea to a company, it may not work right away, but who knows? You may be hired down the road.
Yeah. No, and the funny thing is, I think you're going to continue to see that in our space because it's not precisely defined. It's different, and it needs to be different for each company.
Yeah.
We don't have a huge internal communications function here. So when we do create that, where is that going to go? How is that going to play in? I mean, definitely it's going to plug in somewhere, but I think for each company and each person and, the different level that you are in your career and the different skills that you have, I really think there's a great opportunity for customization, in the company that you're at today.
Athletico has gone through a rapid growth over the past few years, as you mentioned, which creates obviously a lot of excitement and opportunities, but at the same time, many, many challenges. With a bit less than 500 clinics right now and a distributed workforce across multi-states, how do you scale up the culture and the EX, and how do you ensure that there is consistency across other locations?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great question. And that probably embodies why I'm even here. And so I'd love to sit here and say, hey, we figured it out, and here's the silver bullet of how we achieve that. It's an evolving thing because, as you mentioned, growth is obviously a great thing. You always love to join growing companies, and that certainly is the case here at Athletico. But we're growing so fast that we do want to retain that special sauce, that secret sauce that we have that makes us different than others. So, we want to build our processes, such those high touch points, those great moments like onboarding and mentorship and career development, career pathing, even the exit process. We want to take a fresh eye at. We're not doing that initially, but we want to take a fresh eye at that to say, are we really embodying our core values, even as people, not only as they come into a company, but also as they leave a company. But we need to make sure that we are growing or we're setting up new processes that work not just for when we're 5,200 employees now, but what does it look like at 10,000? What does it look like at 15,000? Because if we have a little wiggle or a kink in the hose at 5,200, when you're at 10,000 or 12,000 employees, that becomes a deal breaker.
Yes.
Things stop. Culture is not passed down through, your veterans to the new folks. So we're very keen on making sure that we are setting things up today that we can scale at the way that we want to. And I really think, it starts with the basics. We want to make sure we had reliable reporting so we know where our people are, who our people are, that we could, make informed metric fact-based discussions or fact-based decisions, I should say. But going back to your original question, it is difficult to maintain that. It's a unique challenge, I guess, to us, because in other companies I've been at, everybody's kind of at the mothership. Everybody's in one location, or maybe a handful of locations. Well, here we have 500 locations.
Yes.
And so that's one of the things we're working with our field on. And they're obviously the best source to work with on that is, how do we take our core values and who we are and what makes us special, and keep that going and keep that churning within the clinics as we open up new clinics, as we spin off, leadership and have them plant their leadership into new places. How do we keep that going such as, as close as we can as if we all were in just one massive building all together?
The employee experience space it's a new territory. Many companies apply it very differently, but it's all about having that mindset of iteration, testing, making some adjustments along the way, because there's no recipe that works for everyone. And that's what I like about what Athletico does and what you do in your role as well, is that inquisitive and innovative mindset, knowing that whatever we start or we launch may not work right away, but at least we're testing it, we're getting some feedback, and we improve along the way.
Yeah, no, I think you really nailed it, because, even, not just companies are different. So maybe a company historically has been very good at onboarding, or mentoring was really part of your DNA. And we can all, one of the constants you can do is you can look at all those moments or points of somebody's along the line of somebody's employee life cycle, and say, like, okay, how are we doing at that point? How are we doing at the promotion point? How are we doing it, when they take on a new role of increased responsibility? What happens when they become a manager? Are we setting them up for success? So each company is different, and you might have to, maybe I don't have to worry about the mentoring because we do that really well, but I want to take a fresh look at onboarding because, we've kind of done a best of all breeds, and so we want to drive more consistency. So the companies are going to be different, but I'll also say it depends on your leadership. We actually just recently had new change in leadership. We're fortunate to have a new CEO come in from the outside, and he has brought with him, his best practices and his experiences and what he is seeing well and what he wants to focus on as well. So, even a change in leadership, you have different priorities, different areas of strength. And I think the perspective that he's bringing in from the outside is going to be very helpful for us in terms of helping us prioritize. Because, of course, you can't boil the ocean. We can't look at every moment of every employee, every employee's life cycle and fix them all at the same time. We have to say, like, okay, let's look at the most sensitive parts of that, and where are we going to focus initially and get the biggest bang for the buck, and then, reorder. But I think what you're alluding to is the agility.
Yes.
My role is constantly adapting and changing based on, the business outlook, based on the market, based on leadership, based on competition, based on what our new employees that are coming in through the door are saying. So it's a constant state of flux of trying to get the recipe just right.
Let's talk a bit about competition then. You are in a very competitive fields with a close to zero unemployment rate among physical therapists. What makes Athletico different and attractive?
No, it's a great question. And when you think about it, it's crazy. I know that the market or the economy right now is doing very well, but even more so in the physical therapy space. I mean, really, there's there's more open slots than people coming out of college. So it's a great position to be in if you are a PT, or if you've got kids that are wondering if they want to go through a healthcare career. This is certainly a great one to jump into. But for us, we believe culture is a differentiator. There's a lot of options that they have when they come out of college. You could go to like a smaller mom and pop shop, 1 and 2 clinics, and there's no right or wrong. They're just different. So, in a situation like that, where maybe you have 1 clinic or 1 or 2 clinics, it's a little bit more entrepreneurial in that, you're going to get involved in the lease and in career development and like all the other things of running an entire business, P&Ls and forecasts, et cetera. But maybe your learning opportunities there might have to be outsourced. You might have to do that on your own. You might have to go, take your own classes and the like. Our value proposition to employees is for those that would value, you can be mobile, you can change states. Like I said, we're in, we got 475 clinics in 12 states. So, if you happen to be relocated, chances are pretty good we've got an Athletico in or around that area that you're going to. But it's that culture side of it that we think is different from us, because we think we've got a really great story of how it started from the beginning and has now blossomed into, the size of the company that we have, that you can come here if you choose Athletico, you can come here and grow a great long career, and we can, have more in-house training opportunities. You've got a lot of experts. You can specialize in overhead training or in ballet or, in any number of different specialties. And you might not have that opportunity in a smaller one. Again, not saying it's right or wrong. It's just different. But if you choose to go the bigger path, the larger outsourcing or outpatient physical therapy, we believe that our culture coming from the beginning, and the fact that, our executive chairman and his wife actually run some of our training programs, that's unique, that's different. And that's part of like that small town feel that we love here about Athletico.
That's it's quite a strong statement about the attractiveness and the employer brands itself of Athletico. Good job here, Tom. With a rapid growth and a very competitive candidates market, as we just talked about, how do you balance quantity versus quality of candidates when you have to fill positions very, very quickly? That's a very tough balance to find.
It's really difficult because, you have the needs of the business breathing down your neck saying, hey, we've had this role open for a long time. But I think this is almost industry agnostic. I don't think it's unique to Athletico. I ran into this in the consulting world when, you got slots on teams ready to go and you don't have the people ready to go. It's difficult. It's difficult to say no to a candidate that's not the right person. I think that we in HR need to be relentless about not bending the bar for the price of entry or the type of person that we're looking for, the person with a certain charisma or DNA or background, or I think sometimes, and I can think of 5 examples, when it happened, when you kind of let go a little bit, or you make an exception, and the cost of the wrong hire just seems to be like 10 times the cost of waiting for the right person. Because that person is, we wait for the right person. They're a good culture fit. They come from the right DNA. They have the right work ethic. They are, they're positively impacting the people around them. You get the lift by placing the right person in the clinic, and they get energized, and you just see, like, you can almost tangibly feel the morale of a local clinic going up when you put that right hire in there. Conversely, if you cut a corner and just say, like, well, this person's good enough, and you let your guard down a little bit, and then maybe not initially, but 6 months later, you start hearing the noise and the friction, and, a year into it, it's just like, okay, this person's not working out. Now you're talking about, corrective action and, kind of lining them up against your core values. And here's really what we need out of you. And then, if it happens to go the course of where we have to part ways, where it doesn't make sense. Oh my gosh, the mental hours and the actual hours that you spend on those things, it just far outweighs being much more scrutinized up front. And I'm not saying it's easy. I get it. You're balancing the trying to be the speed of the business, but at the same time, we got to remind ourselves of those cases where we might have let our guard down a little bit, and sometimes it works. But sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, it's really costly to you and to your HR organization and to those in the field that you're supporting to get the right team member plugged in there.
As you're growing very, very fast and you are spread across multi-states, is mobility part of career growth or your career path, or is it a bit further down the road for you guys at this point?
I think it's evolving. It's becoming more of a good thing. When we look at our reasons for leaving codes, and if someone relocates and they don't, they relocate to a place where we're not, well, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. Obviously you have to move with your family, but we are seeing more examples where if someone relocates to Iowa or to Texas or to Arizona and some of the places that we are, it's like, well, we've got clinics down there, so you can move and continue your career. And we've seen a lot of people take advantage of that, which is a great competitive advantage for us. So I would say it's not a strategy that we have right now, but it's a really nice fallback option for us to have that can keep the right talent in-house. I think with each passing month and year, you're going to see that become more and more an option for us to say, like, hey, we want you to stay in the family, even if life takes you to a different location.
It's nice to be able to have the ability to keep those employees and still cater to their obligations to maybe move to a different area or location.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep.
You alluded a few minutes ago that you are currently revamping your onboarding process. It may be too soon to really talk in details about what it is, but let me ask you this question then. What prompted you to revamp or rethink your onboarding process, and maybe talk about what the future state looks like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and, to me, and I think Athletico shares this, is we look at the opportunity that any company would have, not just us, but any company at onboarding. As you have a new hire, whether they're experienced or a campus hire, they come in, they're nervous. Like, they're wondering to themselves, did I make the right decision? Did I choose the right company? And I think until you're probably, a week or two or a month or two or 6 months into it, I don't know if you really know 100%, but boy, what a great opportunity you have right out of the gate to make a great first impression and allay any of those fears that they have. Like in our example, we've got some great stories that we can tell of, clinicians that have taken different career paths, or the impact that our clinicians are making on their communities and getting people better. I worked as a consultant on some banking initiatives, and, those are nice. At the end of the day, you hit your project, it was done on time, it was done under budget, and that's all goodness. But I'll tell you, it's really personally gratifying when you look at some of the thank you notes and the recognition that you get from patients of how good this clinician is. Because it's obviously they're hands-on technical experts. But, if you're a runner and all of a sudden you can't run for whatever reason, you pulled a muscle or, you have shin splints or something like that, and one of our clinicians helps you get back on the road, getting you back to the passions that you do, it's just like pure elation. So those stories, if we can pull those up front into onboarding and reinforce them with our core values, and then also take the person, plug them in and say, like, hey, we're not going to just send you out in a boat and push you out in the middle of the pond. We're going to connect you with a mentor or a buddy to take you through the system. So if you want to ask that stupid question, you can, and you don't feel bad about it. But, kind of setting that person up for success, that's our desired state. We're doing a lot of it right now, but seeing that we're so dispersed, we want to make sure we're having that same experience. If you join us at our corporate headquarters in Oak Brook, Illinois, as you did in any one of our 480 clinics, we want you to have that same kind of high level, high expectation. And by the time the orientation part of it is done and you're kind of connected into your mentoring program that's going to carry you on into the coming months and years, that you really feel like, gosh, I did make the right decision. I did make the right company. They are who they said they are. And how can you, again, there's lots of moments along an employee's life cycle, but boy, that one up front, when there's probably a lot of questions by that new employee, and you really want to put your best foot forward and say, like, we're existing to make you successful. That's a really kind of a magical moment. It sounds cliche, but we just want to make sure that we maximize that opportunity that we have at the beginning of the life cycle.
Yeah, oftentimes it's either overlooked or rushed by many companies. Can you share with us maybe what is a typical first week for a new hire?
Yeah, I think, it's a balance between, storytelling and the cultural side of it with the actual tactical, operational, you got to get them up and working. Mm-hmm. So it takes a lot of preliminary work to make sure that they have the right laptop, that they have the access there, that they check off their I-9s. I mean, there's no other way around that. You have to have that. And if anything goes wrong in those, it's a distraction. Like if you have 19 people in the room and the 20th person doesn't have a laptop, well, for them, that's not a very good experience. They kind of feel dumb, and then they got to have extra attention, and they got to maybe stay late or come in early to get theirs, or if everybody's password is ready except for one person's. It doesn't seem like a big deal. It seemed like you did 19 out of 20, so on a percentage basis, that's pretty good. But for that one person, they're like, this kind of seems like a loose operation going on. So I would say, what we try and do is we balance that operational side of it, of getting people up and running and having them have the access they need to, having them, tied into our LMS system so they can get going right away. And we're constantly working on those systems and the processes and the data flows, et cetera, to make sure that that's teed up. But also we want to make sure we're interjecting enough of that Athletico story, and that's not maybe, you don't maybe need that as a tactical thing to get going on day one, but we want you to know who you are. We want you to know what the expectations are. We want to take the core values that you're going to see in performance management and in recognition. Like, I don't want to say, hey, you did a great job today. I want to say that you did it. I saw you being accountable for your work, and I want to recognize you for reflecting one of our core values here at Athletico, which is accountability. So in addition to seeing that in performance management and recognition and other HR functions, we want to make sure we drive home those core values up front so they know, like, okay, this is what's expected of me. It's not a task. It's not a box you check. It's a little bit more of the who you are. And I think that's critical to have that balance of the, kind of forming your identity from the outset with getting them going. And I'm not saying, I think they're both important, because I can talk to you about culture and great stories and expectations, and here's how we're going to grow your career, and here's your buddy, and all that kind of good stuff, and setting you up for success. But if there's a problem with your I-9 and it lingers on for days, that's a huge problem, and that's a distraction not only to you but also to the clinic or the group or the team that we're trying to plug you into.
How do you see talent acquisition evolve in the next 5 years?
For us, I think there's a couple of things. One is we want to really stay close to our recruitment marketing. I mentioned early on that joining Athletico isn't for everybody. Mm-hmm. Some people don't like or don't prefer outpatient physical therapy. They would rather be in a smaller clinic, and that's fine. But we really want to be on the lookout for exactly who, like looking back at our highest performers, what is their DNA? What makes them up? Where did they come from? Why did they choose Athletico? And we want to go find more of those people. So having a great recruitment marketing strategy or messaging, I think, is going to be critical for that. And so again, it's for some people, they might see our imagery, our branding, our events, our opportunities like, oh, that's really interesting. But there's going to be a certain part of the population that reads that and be like, hey, that's who I am. That really resonates with kind of the core fibers of who I am. So I think recruitment marketing holds a big role. I also think for us specifically, and again, maybe it's a little bit unique because we're at such that 0% unemployment, is I think passive candidates. And actually, there was a time in our history where we just used to be able to slap up an Athletico sign at a career fair, and we'd have a line of people, and it's like, it was easy. Well, times have changed, and it's a very competitive marketplace. And while we do have what we believe to be the best brand and the best culture in the marketplace, we got to work hard at, finding those people. Maybe there's somebody who has left Athletico and is found out the grass isn't greener. Or maybe it's somebody who wasn't really thinking about that next step in their career, but they have an opportunity. We have an opportunity here to step into a leadership position. Would you be interested in that? So that the mining and the staying connected to those passive candidates, the passive sourcing, talent communities, whatever you want to say, I think that's going to be a really interesting development. I don't think it's not anything new per se, but when you're at 0%, you can't just rely on the new talent coming in off of the college campuses. We have to stay connected, and again, maybe somebody made a choice, like I was saying before with onboarding. Maybe they're unsure if they made the right choice. But what about that person that didn't make the right choice, and they're at another company, and they were between Athletico and somebody else, and they went with somebody else? That we would stay close enough that they would see our messaging, our branding, make our people available. Where whether it's through maybe training classes or CEUs or just open events, and so they could kind of explore and understand more about what we are.
You've been in HR for quite some time, and now you are in that new area of employee experience. How do you see the HR function evolve in the next 5 years?
I believe that we're, and that's one reason why I'm here, is that I believe this employee experience is a great wrapper around everything that we want to do in HR. Obviously, talent acquisition has a very specific function to bring in the best talent. But once they're here, it's our role. I don't think it's aspirational to say, I want this to be their best job they've ever had. I want them to, know that we were consistent with our messaging when they were coming in to what they're seeing once they're on the inside. I want our attrition to be low. I don't want people to leave. I do take it personally when people leave. I know that there's great reasons why they do. But if somebody has a choice to leave, I want this to be a place where they're like, you know what? I might have to go over there, but I'm really going to miss the people. I'm going to miss the culture. And I think that's where the employee experience comes in, because that's a great connecting point between, what is their experience as they're being recruited? What's their experience as they made a decision to join and they're in onboarding? What's their experience as they, are being ready for leadership development or their next promotion? Or do they celebrate me enough? Are they equipping me with the right technology that I could really, succeed in my role? Any one of those that's kind of a little bit off kilter could cause someone pause. And part of our role is to continue to bring those to the top of the list and say, hey, I think we've kind of tucked these couple of areas away, but now let's look at, let's say, technology. So I think the EX space within HR, I know I sound like a homer because we're on an EX call right now, but I do believe that this is, kind of one of those areas that need to evolve, and it is very customizable based on each company that you're at.
Yes.
But I really think that for the non-HR people, it's something they can really get their head around and say, hey, the more I can make my employees' experience fantastic, the better they're going to do their job. It's not you're going to say, go do your job better. They're just going to naturally do it better because they enjoy what they do and they enjoy where they're doing it at. So it's less about HR functions and HR initiatives and HR programs, but it's hey, let's just take a step back and be how's their experience right now? Where's it positive? Where can we pour more gas on that? And where maybe do we have some work to do? And what can we do to shore up those areas?
Before we conclude our conversation today, let me ask you some fun questions. What sport do you play?
Well, back in the day, this is a long time ago, I used to play baseball, and then that morphed into softball because I got older and slower and larger. But it was a great passion of mine, and I was able to, coach my kids as I retired my spikes. I got a lot of joy about mentoring and coaching and being competitive with our kids. So I've always stayed at arm's length away from baseball, but that is probably my true passion.
If you were to invite a historical figure to dinner, who would you pick and why?
Wow, that's a great question. I think to me it sounds kind of odd, but I would say Abraham Lincoln. And I believe I love studying and following leadership. Stories or articles or whatever, but I believe that he was one of the best people who made the right decision, even though his inner circle was saying, I don't know if that's the right move. It's easy to make the right decision when all the momentum is going that way. It's a lot harder to make the right decision when you're going to run into friction and opposition. So I always, looked up to him for being to me, that's the definition of a true leader. you're making the right decisions based on the right principles and based on integrity, regardless of the situation around you.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Yeah, this is kind of interesting. So I would say it's quite a wide array. I would like, if ESPN, and my bosses know this here at Athletico, that if ESPN called and said, "Oh, we want you to be a sports anchor," I would be gone the next day. I mean, that's just something I think would be fun. But I've also, interestingly enough, thought about being a pastor. So I've got, a brother-in-law who's a pastor, and I think it's very similar to that employee experience. It's coaching people. It's investing yourself in people. It's trying to, find their calling, find their passion. And so there's a lot of overlap between the two. So that's an area that I've often thought about, that, maybe that's a future chapter in my career.
That's neat. What turns you on?
We are in HR, so I got to be careful with that question. So no, I'm kidding. So I would say, to me, like integrity and transparency, somebody who's confident but not cocky. I really appreciate somebody who knows what they're talking about, and they don't mind saying like, well, actually, that's good, but like here's another way to look at it, and they're confident in what they say. But to me, at the end of the day, hypocrisy is the worst, and so somebody who's going to make, like I was saying about the Abraham Lincoln decision, like if you're full of integrity and you're going to make the right decision regardless of where the prevailing winds are going, that to me says a lot. You're the same person in a one-on-one meeting as you are in a meeting with 20 or 200. I think that speaks well to your character.
What turns you off?
I would say hypocrisy, like the opposite of integrity. I think, somebody who's two-faced or a butt kisser, or, again, going back to that same example, somebody who's different, like one-on-one, they're your best friend. In a meeting of 20, it's kind of so.
Yeah.
In a meeting of 200, they'll throw you under the bus. It's like, I think they need to see you be the same person in all three of those situations, inside of work, outside of work, with your friends. I think the more consistent you see somebody, I think that's a great trait. So I think when you're inconsistent, it's actually a lot harder, a lot more work to do to maintain all those facades. But I think the people that are inconsistent that way, those are the ones that probably rub me the wrong way.
If you were to be sent to a deserted island and you had 3 survival items to pick, which ones would you pick?
Well, I guess I'd have to be practical and say sunblock, right? So that's for my mom. I would probably have to have a Twix bar because that's the best food that was ever invented. And then probably, if it would be, probably access to ESPN. So I don't know if that's asking a lot to have like a big screen and a dish on a deserted island, but I think if I had those 3 things, I think I can make it work. All
right. Well, I'm not going to ask you what's your favorite channel then. It sounds like it's ESPN.
Yeah, you see a theme, right?
All right. What is the way for our listeners to follow you and Athletico on social media?
Yeah. So if you want to follow Athletico, it's at Athletico, and they're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, et cetera. If you want to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm always open for collaboration and meeting more people. So that's probably the best way to go. And if you need to reach me too, you can reach me through the Athletico channel. If you post something in there, they'll always, find the right person.
All right. And we'll share all of this in the podcast notes. Any last word of advice or wisdom?
I don't know. I feel like, looking back, it has been a long time that I've been in my career. And I think, early on, you talk about onboarding and really setting the pace. I've had some great mentors over the year, like an old CHRO that I had worked with at Accenture was really influential on me, and how consistent she was in the various meetings. And I think to me that really resonated. It served me well that I think if you're transparent and you're consistent and you're genuine, I think that's a great combination to have, because then you're building trust. And whether you're delivering great news, it's always fun to deliver great news, or if you're delivering tougher news, the person trusts you that you're not doing this just to be a jerk. You're doing this to draw the best out in them. And she was very good at that. Like, I was on the firing line a couple of times, but I knew ultimately it was because she wanted the best for me. She wanted to challenge me to be better. But we had built that trust and that rapport where I really genuinely trusted what she had to say with me, even if it wasn't what I wanted to hear. So, and I guess another way to wrap that is just speaking the truth in love, right? If you swing too far one way or the other, if you're speaking too much truth with not a lot of love, it kind of feels like a 2x4 hitting you in the head. But if it's all love and no truth, it's like, well, you're everybody's best friend, but you're really not challenging them to be better. You're not being honest. So I think it's that balance, and that balance, even for the same person, can change based on the discussion that you have. You might have more one direction one week, and then the next week it swings the other way. So, those tough messages I was talking about are much easily delivered. And I think they're received as well more effectively when you have that great balance.
It's a great way to end our conversation today. I can see that you're really passionate about what you do. It's been a pleasure, Tom, to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, visit our website at expodcast.com. If you want to find out more about our next conferences, go to exsummit.com. Finally, you can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co. See you next week.